Well, good morning. My name is Meredith Schwartz, and I am the purchasing director with the Department of Administration. The Department of Administration is the business manager for all of the other state departments and government. So we have a kind of a unique group of divisions that we support at DOA, including the hub office. And so, yes, as John said, I have worked together with the hub office to try to increase not only our hub numbers, but to make sure and provide hub vendors with the knowledge and the skills and the resources to be successful in state procurement. So I know many of you probably have already taken the other course that myself and DOT kind of trade off teaching, which is about the rules and the laws of procurement. But this course is going to go over basically once you have a contract, what happens next and how to make sure that that contract is successful for everyone, including the state and the vendor. So like I said, I am the purchasing director over at DOA. We manage a lot of different divisions at DOA. We have advocacy programs such as the Hub Office, Indian Affairs, Non-Public Ed, and the Council for Women, Youth, and Survivors group. Then we manage assets also at DOA. So we have facility management that manages all of the buildings in the downtown complex, state construction, and state parking and state property. So the actual contracts and the kind of the steps can be applied to all state contracts, but we're going to really focus on goods and services contracts that are written for either just standard goods and services or IT projects for software and services and things like that. But we at DOA manage the divisions for state construction, state parking, state property. We also have state services, which is the mail service center. We manage all of the vehicles for the state under motor fleet. Statewide purchase and contract, which writes the rules and the laws and the procedures of how we operate for goods and services purchases. Also, federal and state surplus property. If you are new and setting up a new business and you need any kind of commodities such as desks, chairs, filing cabinets, vehicles, anything like that, if you're starting up a company or just need additional assets, always check out state property, which is off of Chapel Hill Road, and you can get the state's used property for less. They are open to the public to be able to buy used state equipment. Because we're DOA, we call ourselves the land of the misfit toys, and we take on a couple of the other departments that are smaller. So we also do procurement for State Board of Elections, State Human Resources, Lieutenant Governor, and Military and Veteran Affairs. So when we talk about that, we have all different types of contracts and different commodities and services that we manage. So as we go through today, you're going to kind of see what happens from I have a contract to I need to close out that contract and get paid and do final reporting. So you've been awarded a contract. What now? We're going to go through the award process and what you should receive from the agency that you are contracted with. We're going to talk about what is all consuming as far as the documentation that forms the contract. We're going to talk about setting off a contract kickoff meeting and what you should set up in that plan to have that kickoff meeting. And then what's during the contract management piece of it. What needs to be in your client file, what needs to happen on our end and what needs to happen on your end to make sure it's successful. Of course, contract performance, we'll go over our different ways for vendor complaints and different, or if we're doing well and inspections and testing, things like that. We're also going to go over the payment process. So how do you get paid for all that hard work that you've done? And then in the final end, what happens at contract closeout? What are some of those tips and tricks to make sure that everything is finalized with your contract? So first, we're going to talk about the award process. You've gone through all that bid process and putting together proposals or putting together bids. You've gotten all of that. We're going to talk about different purchase orders and things like that. So notifications that you will receive from the state once all of the approvals will happen. So depending on the dollar value, everything in purchasing is driven by what are we trying to buy and how much money it is, depends on the approvals that the procurement had to go through to finally get to an award. So once we have the final award, and any time before then, if you have a question about a particular procurement, call the purchasing office. They can tell you where they are in that process of getting to the award. But once it's all been approved, the award is made and the purchasing office will reach out directly to the awarded vendor. The award will then be posted on EVP. You as a hub vendor should be a registered business with the state and are registered within EVP, which is Electronic Vendor Portal. That is where we post our awards now. That's where we post our solicitations. That's where our vendor portal is to search for vendors. Everything now is held in EVP. So within EVP, once a bid has been awarded, the tabulations are posted. If we didn't post pricing before, it will be posted after at award time. So they'll go back and they can change the tabulations to then show the prices of all the vendors that bid, and then also who was awarded. So you can always keep up with that on EVP. I don't believe it notifies you once that happens, but it is out there for the public and the world to see who bid. The event, if using the sourcing tool, which a lot of our state agencies, I think pretty much everybody is using the Ariba sourcing tool to submit your bids through. So once that has been awarded, the event is closed in Ariba and the award is posted there as well. The awarded vendor will receive a copy of the finalized executed contract. So your submission of what you submitted is countersigned and becomes the actual contract along with some other documents. And we'll go through what those documents could be. So we talk about the actual contract. Oh, and one other thing, when the award, once we get the approval from TNC, we should post that award within 3 days out on EVP. Before, when we were using IPS to post our awards, after 30 days, it will go away. But now with EVP, the award, the tabulation, all of that will stay out on EVP indefinitely. So you should be able to look up on EVP past awards for anything that was originally posted in EVP. Contract formulation. So we're going to talk about the different types of documents that formulate your contract. So like I said, your submission that was presented, so that could include the IFB, RFP, RFQ, the solicitation document that was filled out by you and presented as your bid. It could include any of the information that was included in there that could have been your proposal piece, if we had asked for vendor experience, a work plan, any of those types of things that was required at the time of bid. That all then becomes, once countersigned, becomes your contract document, along with the state's terms and conditions, because you've agreed to those, or we have negotiated those, but the terms and conditions are part of the contract. Any addendums, so those questions that were answered during the bid process where we provided answers, that becomes part of the contract. Any addendums that could have changed, because addendums make changes during the bid process, any addendums that changed scope, changed anything during the bid process. Becomes part of the contract. Like I said, your vendor's proposal. So if we asked for what was your past experience, what is your technical approach of how you're doing the project, any of that that came along with your submittal becomes part of the contract. We have documents called best and final offers or requests for clarifications that can happen during the evaluation phase. So best and final offers happen once we get into negotiations. And then if we have requests for clarifications or if we have questions when we're evaluating, those yes, no kind of questions we could send that to the vendor. But all of those documents then become part of the final contract. Once you have that contract, if there's changes that happen during the life of the contract, any amendments that would happen, those become part of the contract. Renewals, if we exercise renewals, that all becomes part of that contract document, and also each of your purchase orders. So if there's purchase orders that are purchased off of that contract, then those also become part of the actual contract. We talk about who signs what. When we are signing these contracts, they are a legally binding contract. So they are defendable by law. You are held to what is in that contract as far as the scope, the work plans that you submit, the terms and conditions that you've agreed upon. All of that is a legally binding document. So who signs that? Make sure that whoever is signing for your company is authorized to actually sign it, because they are signing that you are providing the services within, as stated within, at the pricing within. So make sure that when you are submitting your bid, that whoever signs it actually has the authority to sign it. And on the back end, we do that as well. So only state authorized individuals can sign contracts, and every state agency has a signature authority policy that usually has delegations or what kind of documents that people are allowed to sign. So that's handled in-house as a separate policy outside of our procurement policy on who can sign what. There's also an execution page. It looks just like this, the same kind of for state use only. When you get the fully executed copy of your contract, make sure and look that any BAFOs that require the signature are also signed by us. So you should have the signature on your submittal on the IFB RP document, as well as any BAFOs that were included. Purchase orders. So most of our state agencies are using e-procurement to submit purchase orders. That is our electronic procurement system. Purchase orders are issued to the vendor's address that is listed in EVP. So it is so important in all of these trainings that you have access to EVP to check who the email address is to, who the remit to address is. We cannot change that. It is on the vendor to make sure that that information is up to date. And I'll tell you why it's so important. One, it's so that you can get paid and get your purchase order. But then two, it's also you get notified when all of those opportunities show up on EVP. If you're registered under those commodity codes in which we are posting, it's also just where when we are looking for vendors, that's who we contact. We look through EVP in our vendor search. So make sure, I just want to stress enough that you go out into EVP and check and make sure that your contact information is correct, your address is correct, and that your commodity codes are correct. In the other training, you can go out to unspsc.org. That is the commodity codes that we use. We use the first 6 digits of those commodity codes and really define what you do. So you're not just getting inundated with opportunities, but you can actually see what is out there that you would like to bid on. But all of that is linked in e-procurement and links to our purchase order system. So once the contract is completed, you should also receive a purchase order for that contract that can be split into multiple lines, depending on if it's multiple years of a contract or whatnot. But the information can be included, but not limited to, would be the description of the items and services, the bid or the contract number, the new accounting codes. We just got a brand new accounting system, so the accounting codes have been updated. The pricing, the delivery schedule, payment terms, any effective dates of the contract, including any of those potential renewals, transportation and freight. And know that transportation and freight or shipping is all a service that's not charged the 1.75 fee. If you are transporting goods, make sure and split that out to 2 lines so that you're charged the fee on the actual goods and not on the shipping. There also be on the lookout for any comments to the vendor. So we have the ability to write comments. Maybe we don't have a loading dock, or maybe there's something like that. So be on the lookout for the comment section of your purchase order, where we can put some more notes to the vendor that just says, now you have the contract. You don't need to contact purchasing. Now this is your contract administrator that you need to reach out to. Things like that. So we can put that buyer information versus the contract administrator contact information in those comments. Know that when you're invoicing, it needs to match what's in your purchase order, so that when you're invoicing and we go pay your invoice, we pay directly off what the line is for the purchase orders. So when you're invoicing, make sure you're always referencing the correct purchase order and maybe even potentially the line or the description in which you're trying to get paid for. So I'm gonna stop there for a minute. Make sure and use the chat. I'm happy to take yourself off mute, raise your hand, and I'll answer any questions that we got.
And at this point, we do not have questions in the chat. So if you want to unmute and ask a question, feel free.
Oh.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Alvin. My name is Alvin White, and you mentioned where those NCIS codes were that have been updated.
Yes.
What was the address?
The commodity codes are www.unspsc.org.
unspsc.org.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you very much.
That's where you can find the codes. Know that those codes get down into an 8-digit level to get very specific. When you're looking to actually register under a code, we would only use the first 6 digits. So we do it at category level and not at actual code level. But if you find something that you do and want to register under that code at the 8 digit, just know that we would only take the first 6 when you register an EVP.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And multiple email addresses be added to EVP, so other personnel. Yes, and I believe now in EVP, thanks, Carla. I believe in EVP that there are ways to set up different people within your company. So if you had somebody that was in sales that needs to receive everything, then you could have another person set up as your business contact or whatnot. I believe that there's now ways to do that. If you have any problems with registering an EVP, you can call the help desk, and all of their information, if you just Google EVP, all of their links or email address or whatnot can help you with your registration. All right. I'm going to keep on going on. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about contract kickoff. And this is about meeting with the people that are going to actually be doing the work and know the ins and outs of the equipment that you're potentially working on or that you're shipping. And so setting up a meeting with them so that everybody's on the same page. So a good idea during this meeting, if they haven't reached out to you, it is your opportunity to reach out to them. You now have their phone number, their email address or whatnot. Set up that meeting. Identify who the project managers are, who the technicians, the staff, the fiscal representatives. Maybe somebody was in sales, submitted your proposal, but they're not going to be the ones that actually is on site doing the work. So identify those roles and responsibilities, set up those deadlines, all of the delivery information, provide the contract information for each member that's going to be on the team, and clarify those terms and conditions of what's in the scope. Are there any other additional steps before work can start? Just know that we could have asked for, and it would have been in the solicitation before you bid. Is it going to require any background checks? Is it going to require you being badged to have access to a building? Is there going to need that you have to order supplies to then start the work? So during that kickoff meeting, let's say you're ordering something, you're ordering gravel to go pour concrete somewhere. Just know that don't order any of those supplies while you're in the bidding process. But you probably need to make clear that, maybe gravel is on back order. I don't know if it is or not, but maybe something is on back order. So set those expectations and know when those things are going to happen. But you would only order those supplies once you have the award, and set those expectations and delivery times and all of that during the kickoff meeting. Establish goals and objectives and deadlines and anything else like you need with that, so that we're all on the same page. Everybody has all the right information and the right contacts and all of that. As far as the scope of work, know what is in your scope of work or your specifications of the products you're supposed to deliver. Read those terms and conditions of doing business with the state. They're very important. And by signing your bid submittal, you are agreeing to those terms and conditions. You can find those on the state procurement PNC website. If you just go out and Google North Carolina Department of Administration, you will find purchase and contract, and then there's vendor forms. You will see the North Carolina terms and conditions. With those, you will know how all of our contracts work. It has things on performance and payment and all of those other things. So know the terms and conditions of doing business with the state and what you are agreeing to. As far as the scope of work and the specifications, you will only be held accountable for what is in the contract. So if you have a landscaping contract and your contract administrator says, well, what are you going to do about these ants? And you are like, well, that's not in the contract. I'm not going to be held liable for taking care of the ants. So just know that what is in your scope of work, because that is what we will hold performance objectives to. Complete any of those pre-contract effective date requirements. I know, like our janitorial contracts, we have background checks that the staff that is going to work there, you might not hire until you get the actual contract. So we try to allow enough time to get through those background checks. Badging, our badging office takes a minute to go get those badges so that they have access to the building. If you were asked to provide a product manual, make sure that when you ship it, it includes that manual. Any user access to our system, to anything like that. If you're doing a DIT procurement, maybe you need access to one of our systems, or you're going to put software on one of our computers. What kind of access do you need for that? And then if you are going to hire staff or go get that equipment, just make sure that you meet any deadlines that are within the scope of that contract to make sure that you're up and ready to go by contract start date. Confirm any deliverables. So if there's reporting requirements, make sure that those reports are delivered. Maybe during that kickoff meeting, make sure and ask them how they want that presented. How does that reporting requirements, when does it need to be there? Who is it being presented to? All of those types of questions. Confirm the delivery times, the instructions. We've bought a bazillion batteries one time and didn't have a loading dock. So they didn't take into consider they were gonna have to pick up each 20-pound battery and move them into the building. So that took extra time. Those kinds of things that you don't think about logistically when you're bidding on something. And if you didn't think about asking those questions during the bid process, make sure you use the question and answer period. You can ask anything when we have to give you an answer. But if we didn't get those, that during that kickoff meeting is the time to secure those types of questions and make sure that the tasks that are listed in the scope, you understand how to complete them and what we're working and looking for. All right, so contract management, we're going to get into how do you guys manage the contract. So our suggestion is to always establish an internal contract management plan. Identify those roles and responsibilities, somehow set up a contract file so that you have all of our contact information. Identify who's doing what on our side. Document the start and the end dates. Make sure you have a copy of all of those contract documents that you keep for your file, because if we ever have a complaint, You want to be able to look back at the contract and say, nope, it didn't say I was taking care of the ants. I'm good to go. Those types of things. Any checklist of the deliverables, keep that in the file, and define subcontractor relationships. All state agency contracts that are for goods and services are between the state and the prime. We do not get in between the relationship between the prime and the subcontractor. So if you are a subcontractor, it is my suggestion that you write your own contract with the prime, so that you guys know who's doing what for this piece of the contract, but we only hold the prime liable for what they have signed for in that contract. So define those subcontractor relationships amongst yourselves, and make sure that your subcontractor, if you're the prime, is doing what they're supposed to, because you're the one you're the one liable that they're doing what they're supposed to. Or if you're the subcontractor, make sure it's defined on what you're getting paid with the prime, because we're not going to get into the relationship between the prime and the subcontractor. Notify our contract administrator or manager of any issues. If you need to change the scope, what if you got in there and this contract was to fix a boiler, and all of a sudden you got in there and it was a much bigger job than what it was supposed to be? You need to let us know that as soon as possible, so that we can amend the contract to maybe add additional funds to get the job completed. Or if all of a sudden there is a back order on something, any types of issues, make sure you let your contract administrator know as soon as possible, so that we can rectify any parts of the contract, because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So we're going to make sure if we need to amend a contract that we get it approved for those extra funding, and that we get it in writing and signed off on appropriately. Monitor and document the progress throughout the life of the project. Don't just, okay, now I got this contract and now we're just going to roll with it. Make sure that you're keeping up with it, because we're keeping up with it, how it's going through the life of the contract. Your administration file could include the contract documents, your contract management plan, the communications back and forth. Keep your emails so that you have documents. Keep a copy of the reports, any shipping documents that you have, your invoicing. Make sure you keep all of that, receipts, billing documents, and then performance reviews and inspection and testing results. And reports. Make sure you keep all of that, because we're keeping it, and that way everybody's on the same page. If we ever ask to amend a contract, make sure you provide a quote for that, and that any contract modification documentation, so anything that's associated with an amendment. Make sure you keep a copy of what the state has furnished, any property, any licensing, any badges, all of that kind of stuff, because you are liable at contract closeout to give it all back to us. So any information that you have, any, I don't know, data even, those types of things, make sure that you know where it is, who has it, and keep up with it, because if it's not there, you could be charged fees, or it could be a big problem if it's not there at the end. So nothing's ever constant in procurement except for change. That's what we say. There's always things that change. So we have a couple of change documents that happen during the life of a contract. One is renewals. Renewals are written into the term of the contract. So the state contract term is 3 years. That is what an agency has approval of, is to award a contract of up to 3 years. If we want to go over that for some reason, we have to justify why we need a longer term and get those approvals before we post it even. So with those 3 years, it could be written that it's a 1-year contract with optional renewals. So they are built in that we have the option to renew. That option is solely on the state. So at that time of renewal, at the time of the current contract's expiration date, we try to reach out a minimum of 30 days before to say, we want to renew. Do you want to renew? and then we sign an agreement. Some agencies do this on an amendment document. Some do it just on a formal letterhead and get that executed. So the renewals are optional, and they're optional for the state to use and do not have to be exercised. And there's lots of reasons why we wouldn't exercise. It could be performance-based. It could be we don't have any more funding. It could be that the scope has changed so much that we want to put it back out for bid. There could be multiple reasons as to why we don't exercise a renewal agreement. Just know that they are optional and that the state has the option to exercise those renewals. The agreement would be sent to you before expiration. It requires signature by you and then by us, and then you would get the final copy of that renewal. Normally, most agencies execute a new purchase order for every renewal that is exercised. So that way they can keep up with the funding. It's on the correct budget year, all of that. So, and then it also shows that then we exercised it. So be mindful when you are submitting your invoices that you are putting the correct purchase order for that year's worth of contract or that renewal if you get a new purchase order for the next year of your contract. Like I said, amendments or changes to the term of a contract. They can be used for anything. So anything that changes during the life of a contract needs to be on an amendment document. It also is signed by both parties. Amendments can be used to change rates. Extensions. So extensions are past the term of the contract. Renewals are written in ahead of time. But if we are going past the term of the contract, then we would do an amendment extension. Amendments could change scope, could change cost, etc. Anything that makes a change would need to be on an amendment. Only the state procurement office can change the terms of a contract. So like I said, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And make sure if your contract administrator just says, yeah, throw that in. You're like, wait, we need to make sure it's documented so that I can make sure and get paid for it. So just know that only the purchasing office can make changes, and it may require additional approvals to make that change. But you would get a finalized amendment for signature that then we would countersign, and you would get the copy of the final executed amendment that would all become part of that contract file. So I'm gonna stop there. And any other questions?
All right, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one being, would it be advantageous to have background checks on standby, or does the organization complete them once awarded?
On the norm, I know at DOA, I know we do them on all of our janitorial contracts, and I don't know if they use a certain company or usually written, and I believe in our document for our janitorials, it's written what has to be included in the background check. So I would assume that as long as you went through and have everything that's included there, you should be good to go if you wanted to go ahead and do it. Just know that it might cost you, and we're not going to reimburse on any cost for that. But just be if it says in the contract document what all is required, I would just be leery that you make sure and are doing it right. I wouldn't want you to do it twice, but that could be a good question during the question and answer period to make them go ahead and define that. So if you had that question during the bid process, you could ask it then and make sure that you're on the up and up, and if you wanted to go ahead and do it, yeah.
All right. The second question in the chat, please reiterate the process of how to follow up on a bid that was previously submitted.
So bids that are previously submitted, right now we use the Ariba sourcing tool to submit your bids, but all of the information on the bid, including the tabulations and the awards, is posted in EVP. So you would go out to EVP and look up that procurement. You can search by department. You can search by RFQ number, our RFP number, IFB number, solicitation number. You can search by commodity code, all of those, to be able to pull up that particular solicitation. And then it will tell you if it's been awarded, and it will tell you who it was awarded to, and the tabulation and the pricing for all of those. So all of that is now posted in EVP. That is where you can find that information. If it hasn't been awarded yet and you are curious, you can contact the procurement office that has posted that bid and see where it is in the approval process, because maybe it's still going on. Trust me, some of these things take a minute to get through the approval process to get final award. So you can always reach out to the procurement office. They can't tell you much, but they can maybe tell you where it is in the process. Has it already gotten, has the agency approved it, and now we're waiting on statewide to final approve it? Did it have to go to the governor's office? There's all those different approval processes that it could have to go through. So they might be able to tell you where it is in the process.
Those were the only two questions in the chat. We can open up for unmuting your mic if anybody has an additional question. And Tony, you can go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Yes, hi. Is this process upon registration for any business outside of North Carolina? It must be a North Carolina resident.
No, it can be any vendor registered to do business with the state, outside, inside, doesn't matter where. So anybody can register to do business with the state in EVP and register as a hub vendor, even if you're outside of North Carolina.
And also, I know you may not have gotten this far yet. Pay terms, is there a net pay period for?
It is. We are net 30. Most of that happens faster, but that net 30 starts from the time the invoice is approved at the actual division until it gets to the fiscal office. That's when that 30-day clock starts to get it paid. I know at DOA, we have the most outstanding payment account payable people, and they usually get it paid pretty quick, way less than that 30. But every department's different, but they all have, and that's written into the terms and conditions of doing business with the state, that it is net 30. All right.
I have, is that one more hand raised? Let's see.
I think that was.
That's still Tony.
Yeah.
All right. That's it.
All righty. Get back here in the chat.
Oh, it looks like Eric Fonville.
Yes.
Okay.
So I wanted to know, you said the 30 days starts when
The 30 days start.
Or
Yes,
we
so
when that 30 days get started?
So the 30 days start from the time the invoice is approved by the contract administrator and it is received at the fiscal office. So fiscal is accounts payable. So 30 days starts there. So once it's approved and it gets to fiscal, it's got a net 30 there.
Right. What I'm saying is we may submit our invoice, and then 5 days later is when it gets approved. Will we be alerted that, hey, your invoice has been accepted, your 30 days starts now?
No, not on the norm, but you could always reach out to your contract administrator and say, where is it? There's no automatic alert. All right, I'm gonna push through. All right, so we're going to get into contract performance and make sure that everything goes well for us and for you guys during the term of a contract. So some things to look out for in the solicitation document. It might have listed if there was inspections or testing and what those look like. If not, you can always ask that during the question and answer period, but know that inspections are conducted to document the compliance within the contract scope of work and specifications of the product. So they could have included some kind of testing requirements, but that should have been written into the scope. But know that we don't consider delivery to be complete until installation is complete, disposal of waste, and whatever is installed is fully operational. So know that if you are, we do not pay ahead of time. So we will not receive an invoice until it's fully operational, unless there is some kind of exception for that. Maybe there was a piece here and a piece there, it was broken into phases or something like that. But on the norm, delivery is not considered complete until whatever it is fully installed and operational. Services are inspected by the contracted manager or administrator. They are the ones that are going out and inspecting any kind of service that we got, whether it's painting or janitorial, or could be consultant service. All different kinds of services could have some kind of inspection to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for. What you will be held to is what is in that contract. So the specifications must include all of the information on that product, or the scope of work will have the specifics of what you have to do and those tasks that you have to complete. And that is what we will be holding you accountable for. Invoices will not be paid until the using agency completes those inspections and all goods are accepted. If you have a purchase order and you are shipping us something, let's say you're shipping us pens, we will go into that purchase order and receive those pens once they get to us. And so up until the point that we receive an e-procurement, that's when then you can invoice against that purchase order. So it's up to the agency to say, yes, I received the delivery, everything. They inspect, make sure that they got all their pens, and then they say it was fully received. Now you can invoice, and now we can submit payment. Make sure that you have communication and documentation. I can't document. Everything that happens during the life of a contract, every email, all of that becomes part of that contract, so that you have, that's what we're doing on our end, is documenting everything to make sure that the contract goes the way it's supposed to. The state will notify you of any damaged goods or inaccurate order. We do have that capability within e-procurement as well, to say we didn't get this piece, we're still waiting on this piece, and we can go in and receive just the pens, but not the folders or whatnot. We can go in and do partial receipts on our purchase order. The vendor shall notify the state of anything late, anything back ordered, discontinued. Maybe then we'll have to go and pull that PO and start over. The ability to meet the contract requirement. If there is some reason why you cannot meet a contract requirement, you must alert your contract administrator as soon as possible, so that we can do the backup to make sure that we're have ourselves covered. So if we have a thing where we've asked for 5 staff members to come in and do a project for us, and you can only provide us 4, we need to know that up front. We've asked for 5, that's what you quoted for us is 5, and now we're going to have to do something to get that 5th person in there. If requested, change orders. So if you have something that changes, make sure that you provide a quote for what is changing. And then we always have the ability to say, no, we're not going to amend. We're going to put this back out for bid. But if you did have something that changed, chances are we will have to amend the contract. Just like I said, make sure that we get it in writing, we go through the proper approvals, and we complete that amendment process. And document all the communications for reference, so that you can say, okay, but this is where I was notified that something wasn't going right. This is what I did to fix it. So therefore we should all be good. I told you over email, this was all happening. So make sure you document, because things that happen over verbal just always can get lost. Make sure you actually document it in writing, and that way you have it. So vendor complaints. We know that things happen. We know that sometimes vendors can't meet those terms of that contract, but we do have those inspections so that we make sure that we're getting what we're paying for. So a contract manager or administrator, that is their responsibility to inspect and document any vendor complaints, and they work directly with you to the vendor to solve any of those issues. So hopefully they can get that resolved. Y'all can come to an agreement and get whatever that complaint is off the table. The vendors will be held accountable for what's written in the contract, and included in the terms and conditions, number 1 in there is all about performance and default. So make sure you read the terms and conditions, make sure you know what's in your scope of work, what is required of you to hold that contract, because that's what you will be held to. Vendors, if we do have a complaint, you will be given the option to cure any issues, and the state will provide, hopefully, suggestions on what we need you to do to fix the problem. If it gets to the point where the contract administrator can't get done what they need to get done, they could come to the purchasing office and say, hey, I'm having this consistent complaint with this vendor. What can we do? And that is where we can issue a formal vendor complaint. Formal vendor complaints are sent from the purchasing office. They include that action to cure. This is what you got to do to fix the problem. And you need to respond to that formal vendor complaint. There are deadlines in there. Usually it's 10 days you have to respond to that complaint. You can respond that I don't agree with this complaint. You can respond that I don't agree with this action to fix it. I think that we should do this. You could say, hey, I want to set up a meeting. You could do all of that, but you do have to respond to by the deadline to not potentially lose that contract. The vendor or the state could request a resolution meeting. We've done those in the past where we all sit down and we're like, okay, this is what's happening. What can we do to fix it? And all of that. We want these contracts to work. Trust me, it takes a lot of work to get them going. We want to make sure that they continue to go. We want to work with great vendors, and I know vendors want to work with us. So we try everything to keep these contracts going. The vendor can find, but if we can't get it to where you can't meet those terms of the contract, you can't do whatnot, just know that you could be found in breach of contract or default, and therefore we could hold payment until those remedies are met. Or we could just terminate the contract and move forward with a different vendor. There are 2 different types of termination. These are listed in those terms and conditions of doing business with the state, as well as the instructions to vendors. All of those are either listed in the RFP, the solicitation document that you signed, or they're also listed on statewide procurement's website or state DIT's website, are the terms and conditions. We have termination for convenience. So that could be where we just ran out of funding. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. It could be that this isn't working, and so we just need to terminate it, but no harm, no foul. We will give you we will give you notice on a termination for convenience, and it is per the terms and conditions of the contract. So within the terms and conditions of the contract, it will say what that effective date notice we have to give. Also, there is termination for cause. This is where we have found the vendor in breach of contract. It will be listed out. Here are the scope of work that you did not meet. Here is whatever you did not meet. Therefore, we are terminating this contract effective immediately, or we could give a couple of days if we needed whatever amount of time to get it together. But it could be that a termination for cause is that we found the vendor in breach of contract. Some things with termination, whether it's the end of a contract or it's an actual termination. Return all state-issued equipment and access badges. That's a huge thing that once we're terminated, we've got to get all those badges off. We turn off all the badge access. If you have access to our systems, we need to get you out of the system, all of that. Follow any final billing instructions that would be in the letter for termination, maybe where to send your last invoice, the dates of the last invoice, things like that. Know that if you are in breach of contract and there was a performance guarantee attached to that contract, which would have been in the solicitation agreement that you signed, Any performance guarantees may be withheld so that we can continue our program or continue this project if you are found in breach. So know that if you are found in breach of contract, there could be the potential that you are forfeiting the performance guarantee that you agreed upon. Any questions on performance?
There are no questions in the chat. So if there is a question, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Hello, this is Alvin White again. You gave me the information about NCIS codes. I went and updated my profile and put them in, but here's my hypothetical question. A bid was put in, let's say, a week ago, and now that I've updated my codes, will the e-process link me now to that bid, or do I have to go to get to know that I've been, to aware me of the bid?
Going forward, it will. If anything is
Okay.
already posted, it will not alert you. But you can search in EVP for any bids that are out there under that code.
Okay, that was my question. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
There is a search. When you go into EVP, you can hit Browse Solicitations, and then you'll see a filter button, and you can filter by all kinds of things: keyword, department, date of posting, and the commodity code. So you can
Yeah,
search.
I've been playing around with it. I just got to get better at it. That's all.
It's a pretty, we're very excited about it. It's definitely one of the better things that we've got lately.
Well, I didn't know I needed to put these codes in, so this was a very valuable hour this morning. So thank you.
Yeah, great. All right, Tony.
Yes, I just got another follow-up. With the selection process, I know that may be another portion that you may get to. How are they screening the different vendors to be able to be awarded the contracts?
So that is part of the bid process. There's multiple ways that we award contracts. It's written in the solicitation on how we evaluate that particular bid. If you haven't already taken the other Purchasing 101 class that Carla heads up, I suggest you take it. It is a longer class than this one, but it goes into the details of working with the state and the whole bid process from start to finish. So that if you haven't already taken that, I suggest you take it.
Thank you. Great.
You're welcome. All right. I think we're getting towards the end here. We're going to get into payments and the payment process because everybody wants to get paid. All right. So costs billed by the vendor must be in accordance with the contract payment terms and match the purchase order. So it's very important when you get that purchase order that your invoice matches exactly what's in that purchase order. If for some reason it doesn't, reach out to your contract administrator and say, hey, this wasn't what was in the contract, or whatnot. If there is no contract, let's say this is a small purchase, it would behoove you. It should match any quotes that you submitted. So for small purchase, we get quotes. We don't get bids or proposals or whatnot. But your quote is your contract per se. The purchase order should match your contract. If you're ever submitting a quote for goods, always take the shipping and make it a separate line item. Because that way, in e-procurement, you're charged a 1.75 fee on e-procurement transactions only for goods. So if you are submitting a quote, I would make sure that your quote has goods and then the shipping separate. But if it's for a contract, make sure that your purchase order matches what's in the contract and that the purchase order matches your quote. Typically, the state pays net 30 from the time an invoice is approved. The state does not pay for goods and services ahead of time. So we pay after we have received net 30. All payments to the vendor are dependent upon and subject to the availability of funds. That is written in the state's terms and conditions. So even if we had a contract, we'd run out of funding, and then we couldn't buy whatever it was, then you wouldn't ship it. We wouldn't get it. That's part of the terms and conditions number 5. The state does not agree to pay costs such as interest, late fees, penalties, or attorney fees. That is in the terms and conditions under number 9. We will not pay late fees. We will not pay any penalties or any interest for payment purposes. We do have the capability to sign up for electronic funds transfer. So the state does have that capability for electronic payments. That is on this Office of the State Comptroller. That is the website there. You will get a copy of this presentation, and that is the email address or the website to be able to sign up for electronic funds transfer for payment. So invoices, make sure that our invoices are going to be submitted to the bill to address on the purchase order. So don't send purchasing the bill. You want to send it to facility management that is actually going to approve that invoice. So make sure you're sending it to the right place, because that could delay payment if it's not going to the right place. So on your purchase order, there is a bill to address. That is who should receive your invoice. Include on your invoice your item description, your services completed. Like I said, it should match what's on your purchase order. Include the purchase order number. Make sure it's the right one for the right year with the contract. Any contract numbers, any required reporting that's supposed to be attached to it, all of that would have been part of your contract. But make sure and including that on your invoice. Ensure that your remit to address is up to date in EVP, because that is where that payment is going as well. So if that's not correct, you will not receive payment. So that's all up on the vendor to make sure that their EVP is all together right. All right, so we're at the end of the contract. You've completed all the tasks, you've done everything, you won it, you got it, you performed great. Now we're at the end. We're going to talk about closeout activities. Ensure that all the deliverables are met so that you can be paid. Make sure that you've met all those scopes, all those final reports, everything. Return all of that state equipment. Make sure we get your badges back. Make sure that we get any equipment or computers or access all closed out. Close out any access to the state-supported systems. Ensure that all the disputes or corrective actions have been resolved. So get all of that done so that when we're done, we're done. Comply with the state retention policies. So know that there are retention policies on files that are kept by vendors that are awarded a contract, as well as the state. So be on the up and up with what those retention policies are. Sometimes it's 3 years during the life of the contract. Sometimes it could be even up to 5 years after the term of the contract. So be in compliance with that. That is also listed in the terms and conditions. It's also listed into the instructions to vendors. So all of that about retention policies is listed in those 2 spots. Final acceptance by the project manager is then received. You can submit that final invoicing. And then if any additional tasks must be completed, make sure you get with the contract administrator before the contract expires. We can't amend an expired contract. So if there's extra tasks that need to be added to a contract, that needs to happen before that expiration date to add that amendment. So be on the lookout for that too. And Gary with my office says the state does not pay sales tax on goods or services. Be mindful of that we are tax free. We do not pay the sales taxes. Thanks, Gary. All right, do we have any questions? And I think we are at the end of today.
All right, there is one question in the chat, and that question is, does the state purchasing or hub has any use for our capability statements? I created one for another municipality, but I understand how the UNSPSC codes in EVP may serve as that capability statement.
Yes, I don't think for marketing purposes it would hurt to send a capability statement to a different, to a certain department if you're trying to market to them. There's no reason that you can't reach out. If you go onto Statewide Procurement's website, you can find the list of all the different department procurement agencies and their directors, and you could always send that out and say, this is what I do. Do you have any divisions that potentially would be interested in these goods or services? So it's not a bad thing to have, but you're correct. Like, we go mainly off the commodity codes when we're looking for vendors.
That was the final question in the chat, and I do see a
And may I-
hand raised.
And may I just quickly add to that? Good morning, everybody. I'm Shay McIntyre. I work in business development with the Hub office. And so we also do collect those capability statements, typically as a part of the business development process, or sometimes through our supplier diversity efforts for the Hub office. Then we have reached out periodically to ask firms to provide capability statements also, so that we have that additional reference information as we are solicited sometimes for firms that do particular work. So I'll provide an email address also for you. Okay, thank you.
It looks like Dee asked, does an invoice need to be mailed or can it be sent via email? I think nowadays they can be sent via email. That's a question for your contract administrator. You can ask it during the question and answer period, or just reach out to your contract administrator and say, what's the best way for me to send it? But I think we can get them all pretty much via email now. It does have to be branded. Know that you can't just send an email that's like, hey, you owe me $50. You need to be like an actual invoice.